Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
La 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 la. Hello. Good morning. Welcome to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and/or translator, and around the world, FM translator, and around the world at MichaelDukesShow.com on the interwebs. Hello and good morning. Oh, well, welcome. A little bit more rain. I just read the weather forecast, and there's another front forming right now, so we're expecting more rain. But, you know, again, at least just look on the bright side, my friends. It's not snowing, all right? Well, maybe it is in wherever you are in the state of Alaska, but where I'm at, it's not snowing yet. So it's a positive. It's a positive right now. I know that in Fairbanks, any day now, they're probably going to say they're going to see that termination dust and be like, yeah, stop talking about it. Sorry about that, guys. But welcome to the program. It is Thursday. And today, we are ready to dive into it and get into this continuing discussion of candidates that we are working on right now. We are looking at the candidates we're looking at today include Kathy Henslee, who is running in the Anchorage area for state house, and that is going to be for state senate in district. I'm looking at the wrong one. I'll find it here in just a second. Too many different things here jumping in on this. There's another race. There we go. Yep, right there. District 13. Kathy Henslee in District 13. It was the House district. I was right to begin with. Whew, man, so many candidates, so many different positions. House District 13. Kathy Henslee will be joining us to talk about her candidacy against Andy Josephson, who is the registered Democrat in that race. She's a registered Republican. There's also an independent candidate, and it should be a fun discussion there as well to see what's going on. Then we're going to move further down south, this time into the Homer area for House District 6, where we will have Louie Flora on the program to discuss his candidacy. He is registered as a and a handful of others. Oh, look, it finally rendered. Rosalind Casey, Stephen Wright, Cliff Grow, Jessica Wright, Sharon Jackson on Monday. Whew, man, it's a big week. And then the following week, we've got even more coming up as well. So it's going to be a busy time over the next couple weeks. Today is the 22nd, and that officially puts us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we're 5 weeks away. 5 weeks away from election week. So, and I know some places, like for example in Fairbanks right now, they're actually running their municipal elections at the in October. So we're only a couple weeks away from municipal elections in some of the various communities as well. So I just pay attention to what's going on, and we'll see what happens. Okay. It's the internet this morning just all of a sudden just quit for half a second there. So welcome back to the program if you just got back to it. We're gonna dive into it. All right, we've got some headlines. What else are we gonna do? Here's the interesting there are some of the interesting headlines for this morning. First and foremost, I had to chuckle because the headline read, as a $3,284 permanent fund dividend hits the bank accounts across Alaska, economists predict widespread impacts. And I'm just like, that's like looking outside and saying water is wet. Yes. The fact that you're about to, that you just deposited $3,200, $3,300 into every person's bank account, that's going to have some economic impacts. Yes, you are 100% correct. The story goes on to talk about, the earnings of the permanent fund and how this check is kind of a windfall, and the size of the money should free up spending on recreational items more so than in recent years, and maybe dining and traveling out. Although I will say right now, I have not seen a whole lot of people who are like, I'm going to Hawaii on this money. I've seen a lot of people say, like, I've already spent my dividend. Look at these new tires on my car. Look at the new thing and the payoff that I did, and I pay down my debt from the pandemic. And I mean, I've seen a whole lot of that. I have not seen people walking around with a lot of big screen TVs or trips to Hawaii's, or, I don't know. What does everybody say that we, the Kathy Giesels and the Jennifer Johnsons of the world is that, we must have done hookers and blow with it, and that was all we did. We just blew the money on stuff that was, no, I have a feeling that this is a lot of this is going to go back to fixing a lot of what's been wrong over the last 3 years, especially since we've seen that housing prices and rents and things like that have jumped tremendously. I mean, down in the Anchorage area especially, they've jumped up 14% in just the last year alone. And across the state, mortgages and rents and things like that are just, they're running rampant. I have a friend who's trying to move. They're the house that they've been living in for 10 years. They've been leasing it or renting it for 10 years. And the owner finally decided to sell it. And so now they're having to move, and they've been trying to find a place in their area there in Eagle River for like 2 months. And, except that you have to spend $30,000 a year just to rent the place. I mean, it's insane. It's insane what they're asking for in some of these areas. So I have a feeling that some of this money is definitely going to be used for heating oil and fuel, and not to mention, again, the people in the bush, the people in the rural communities. So I was more chuckling at the headline. Economists predict widespread impacts. Well, in that case, I'm an economist because I've been talking about that for a long time. What is the impact as that goes on? Absolutely crazy. I've got a little bit of good news as well. How much time do I have here? I don't have much time before we get into it with this Kathy Henslee. I guess we'll, all right, I'll cover this story just because it's, I don't know. It's disturbing. Alaska's former acting attorney general was indicted on Monday by a grand jury, according to the ADN, on 3 felony charges of sexual abuse of a minor. Now, Ed Sniffen, 58, was first charged in May, and this was not a recent incident. This was back in 1991. So I'm doing the math on that. That's what, 30 years ago? 20? No, 30 years ago, because it'd be 2001. So 30 years ago. 30 years ago, Sniffen, who replaced former Attorney General Kevin Clarkson, who resigned because he sent a bunch of inappropriate text messages to a female employee, he stepped into the role. And that is when this gal named White came forward with the allegations that he was being appointed to the state top prosecutor job. Apparently, she had a relationship with Sniffen back when she was on the West High School mock trial team trip to New Orleans. She was 17, he was 27. And they continued their relationship. Apparently, this was originally reported to the police, but she refused to cooperate at the time. And so nothing ever happened to it. But now she came forward and brought it back again. She wrote in a motion, the allegations were reported to the police in 1994, but the case was closed because White did not cooperate. So anyway, I don't know what it is with the Department of Law, but apparently they've got some issues over there that maybe somebody needs to come in there and lay hands on some people. Pray in Jesus' name that you guys get your stuff together, because that place apparently is a hotbed of bad juju. That's all I'm saying. Bad juju right now. And the final issue, which one do I want to talk about? I don't have time to really talk about either one of them. There is a story, and my dad asked me yesterday about a story. My dad was in the chat room and asked about the story about Alaska Airlines, which I'm going to have to get to later on in the show. I was going to use the last segment to take phone calls, because I always like to get reactions from people, from the various guests and candidates that we have. I always like to give that last segment for a chance for reactions, but we might just have to use it for some stories that we've been holding on to. But there's a couple stories. One about the stories. I don't know if you saw the congressional committee. Mary Peltola introduced the mayor of Nuiqsut to the congressional committee, and she went on for a bunch of times about the gas leak up there and everything else. And there was some contention in that committee. And all I could say is this a snapshot of things to come in Washington, D.C. with Mary Peltola at the wheel. Also, the Juneau School District has got a big fervor going on right now about kids changing, swim team members changing in the same swimming or in the same locker room. And then again, that story about Alaska Airlines, feeling a little bit of the bite from their wokeness. So I guess those are the 3 stories that we will pick up later on in the program. How about that? We'll deal with it then. I just don't have time to go into the details on any of them. So much to talk about in so little time. All right, let's just move ahead. We got Kathy Henslee. She's going to be joining us here in just a minute, and we will see what she has to say. Kathy Henslee, of course, running for House District 13 down in Anchorage. We'll be back in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget, you can come out and join us on Facebook as well for the simulcast. That's where we've got our chat room, where everybody can come in and comment and talk about all the things that are being discussed as they are being discussed. Back with more right after this.
What is that?
Common sense.
Regularly heard on American radio.
Michael Duke Show.
Radio.
Oh, hello. Man, I don't know what happened there, but my internet went. I have the fastest internet money can buy. I have to laugh because my internet here in my home studio is faster than what we have at the radio station. It's bad. It's like, yeah, but this morning it went, oh, man. So anyway, hi, how are you? Good morning. Apparently, I never lost connection with the other radio stations via the internet. Apparently, just my stream went down. So that's okay. So at least, not that you guys are not a priority, but let's face it, dead air on the radio, a lot worse than a frozen screen on YouTube. That's not something every broadcaster's nightmare is dead air. That's just like, it's anathema to who we are. All right. I see that in the green room, Kathy Henslee has joined us, and we're going to get to her in just a hot second, test her audio, make sure everything sounds good and looks good and does all that. I'm just looking through here to see if there was anything else that I wanted to comment on before we jump into the test. I don't see anything, so let's go over there right now and see if we can get everything squared away with Kathy Henslee and see what she has to say. Good morning there. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Michael. I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, you sound good. Look at that. Is it usually I'm so blown away because people got great microphones that you sound great. So without having to blow my ears bleed kind of thing. So good deal. You all ready to face the music here and talk about all the different things and see what you guys see what your positions are and all that?
I am. Am I going to be on video?
You're going to be on video and audio. That's how we work today. This is the 21st century.
I would have done things a little differently, but I just didn't realize it. That's okay.
No, that's fine. You look great. You sound great.
Okay.
What more could you ask for?
Yeah,
right?
Let's go for it. We're good.
Yeah. So, I figured that I told my wife last night, I said, because just recently in the last couple months, I've got this new software that allows me to do both video and audio and everything else. And I said, if the one silver lining of the pandemic is everybody now is all used to Zoom, so they all just at any point can log on and do it. So
true.
Yeah, no, I think it's better. It's good to be able to see people and see their expressions, and it makes for a better experience in the long run. Now, people listen on the radio. Yeah, people on the radio, they don't care necessarily, but since we are broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch all at the same time, why not do it? So. Yeah. All right, Kathy. Well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go back into the chat room here to see what they have to say. I'm going to put you back in the green room here for just a minute and a half or so, and that way you can get your cup of coffee, get yourself ready, do whatever you need to do, and then we will be right back to you, folks. I'm just saying, if I'm being honest, says Kenneth, I'm way less interested in these candidate interviews than the discussions on Alaska issues. Well, I think if we don't talk to the people who are contributing to these issues, then I agree. I enjoy talking about the issues, together. I enjoy all that, but if we don't talk to the people who are going to be in charge of these issues, then we could talk about the issues till we're blue in the face. Nothing is going to change. We have to find out. We have to understand where these people are coming from. Debbie says, what about the encouraging stories? I've got a story that I will get to as well. I know the good news, right? Because she's asking about the good news. I'm trying to do that. And then Caterpillar D110LL said, termination dust spotted on the way into Fort Knox this morning. Oh, man. Little bit of the white stuff up there outside of Fox. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. And Michael Chambers says, Kathy Henslee is top shelf. Her opponent, Andy Josephson, is a full-blown liar. Okay, well, we'll see. I don't know. I put out the request to everybody, including Andy Josephson, and I didn't hear back from him, but I did hear back from Kathy. So that's how that goes. Oh, I got to turn that down again, don't I? All right, we're going to get back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like it, share, like it, share, like it, share. Here we go. Let's do it. All right, welcome back to the program. The Michael Duke Show continues. We are now on to our candidate in our candidate interviews, which we were just commenting. Somebody in the chat room just said, I'm not interested in the candidate interviews as much as I am talking about the Alaskan issues. Well, we've got to talk about the Alaskan issues, but we've got to talk to the people who are going to have the largest effect on these issues, and many times that's your political leaders. That's what we have to do. I know sometimes it's the broccoli before the dessert, but that's what happens. We got to talk with these folks. Joining me this morning to discuss this is candidate for State House in District 13. It is Kathy Henslee, who is the Republican in the race, running up here in this new kind of redistricted mishmash against Andy Josephson, and she joins us this morning to talk about it. Good morning, Kathy. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
Again, any day above ground, that's a winner. That's a winner right there. And as long as there's no white stuff, I guess there's white stuff out by Fort Knox and Fairbanks, but there's no white stuff down here, so I feel like it's a win for me. So
yep. We know it's coming.
Yeah, they know it's coming. They know it's good. All right, Kathy. For folks who don't know who you are, now you've kind of exploded on the scene here in the last 18 months, 2 years, with all the different races and the whole Bronson thing and the assembly and everything in Anchorage. And you were part of that, conservative cadre of candidates for the assembly and everything. So, you've really kind of, come out on the scene, so to speak, as one of the strong conservative voices in the Anchorage area. But for folks who don't know who you are and listeners from Homer to Fairbanks, who are you? Where do you come from? Give us a little bit of background here.
Yes. Well, I'm a lifelong Alaskan. And so I lived the Alaska experience, right? My mom and dad were subsistence hunters and fishers. And I took moose tongue sandwiches to school when I went to Rabbit Creek Elementary, like a lot of Alaskan kids, right?
Oh, wait a minute. We got to talk about the moose tongue sandwiches. Yeah. I mean, I took moose tongue sandwiches.
Okay. All right.
A little dark bread, a little spicy mustard. Oh,
that's right. Yep.
I haven't had a moose tongue sandwich in about 10 years, and I'm really jonesing for one right now. So
it brings back the memories, doesn't it?
Thanks for bringing that up. All right, Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So my husband and I have 5 kids, and their families have kids. And so we have 5 grandkids. Everybody in our family lives in Alaska. Our oldest son lives the furthest away from us, and he lives in Nome. I'm also a realtor, and I've been involved in real estate in Alaska for most of my adult life. I've always been very involved in our community because I am a family person, I'm a business person, and our community in Alaska has always been very important to me. It's my home, and it's where I intend to live for the rest of my life. So as I've stayed involved, I've worked on parental choice issues for 27 years. I helped write the very first charter to start Family Partnership Charter School, which started the whole charter school movement in Alaska, which is really a positive step for our families. And then while I've been working and running businesses, I also started volunteering for an organization called Priceless Alaska, which is an organization that works with women rescued from sex trafficking in Alaska, which is a terrible issue, and became their transitional housing director and program director, and did that for quite a while. So I have a unique perspective on business, a unique perspective on education and families, and a unique perspective on social issues in Alaska.
And yeah, I mean, that's good to hear, being engaged and doing all these things. Now, you ran for assembly. I was going to say borough assembly. It's municipal assembly in Anchorage. Right. You ran for assembly. That didn't come to fruition. That was a bitter race for a lot of people. It's very contentious right now. It's like open warfare in Anchorage right now between assembly candidates and mayors and everything. I'm glad I don't live in Anchorage is what I'm saying. But you now made this transition up to the state house. So I guess what I want to ask is, especially in light of the contentiousness of your last race and everything, when exactly did you lose your mind? I mean, when exactly did you say, I really want to be involved in these political things? Let me go out there and get riddled full of arrows. That sounds like fun. I mean, what was the impetus? Was there a single thing that just tripped you over, like the final straw, or was it cumulative? Or, give us a little bit of your mindset there.
It really, Michael, you could say that I kind of lost my mind, because a couple of years ago, Several years ago, my husband, who was a full-time National Army Guard pilot, came home from Afghanistan for he was over there many, many times in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the way our family lived. And he was fighting for, our freedom to continue here in the U.S. And it was a decision that we had made as a family that we were going to continue to do that. He's an Army National Guard pilot. And he retired, and we're ready for the good life, right? And then I wake up one day and all our businesses are closed. And in my district and in my circle of friends, lots of businesses, people own businesses. And I am normally a happy person. I really like my life. I'm very optimistic. And I realized I was waking up angry every day. I didn't like the fact that bureaucrats had taken over our decision-making process for our families, that our kids couldn't go to school, that our businesses were being closed, that our life was shut down. And I really, one day I woke up and I was angry again. And I said to my husband, I feel like you fought for our country for 32 years. And now it's my time to step up and do that. And so I really started thinking about what can I do? And I have always been that kind of person. If there's a problem, I look to myself for the solution. What can I do? And right. I thought, I can bring a voice that's looking for different results in this community. And I don't really know what that's going to look like. I don't know how I'm going to be, how people are going to respond to me. But this is what I believe in, and this is what I care about, and this is what I'm going to stand up and do. So the first time I actually in 2000 ran for State House then. Against Chris Tuck. And that was another thing, is we've had leftists in this district elected for about a decade. And that's not what I see. I don't see that as representation in this district. So I ran against him. I won the primary against another Republican, and then ran against him, and just really did a good job. I came very close. And then thought, well, I didn't win. So that was, what I did. And I'll move on to trying to help in some other way. But then the assembly was just losing it, as you know, and right. Anchorage was being moved into a direction that I was not happy with. And so I made the decision to run for assembly with a lot of support from, as you said, a big group of people that we were trying to make some changes in Anchorage. And that was a hard fought race. We worked so hard. We had a great team. We really worked hard. I really felt like we had a chance. And I think a lot of people were surprised that didn't turn around. And then again, I thought, okay, well, that was it. Really, really fought hard. That was it. And as soon as we realized that was a losing race, I started getting phone calls from other conservatives in our district saying, your name recognition, and you've been out there, and people are responding to you, and would you please try one more time? And so Steve and I talked about it. It's a huge commitment, as you know. I still run a business. I still have, big family. And I just thought, I am not the kind of person that could just let someone walk into that office without a real competition. And right. So we declared to run again. I always say we because it's a huge team. My whole family's involved, and we have a lot of volunteers and people that are really supportive. And so here we are again. And this election's been going well. We had a primary. There were 3 of us in the primary. And when it all ended up shaking out at the end, I ended up winning by 1 vote.
Right. Oh, and that's kind of crazy, isn't it? I mean, how close it is when it's all said and done. Yeah, because the preliminary numbers, when they first came out the day after the election, you were at 48%, he was at 45%, but then it just trickled down. And it's, people say it doesn't matter if we vote or not anymore. I've seen so many races in my I've been broadcasting in the state of Alaska continuously for over 23 years. And I've seen a lot of different races, and I have seen, probably 5 or 6 races in this state, local and everything else, that are decided by less than 10 votes. Several of them decided by 1 vote, and 1 decided by a coin toss. I mean, that's how, your vote does count. And I think that's important to know. Kathy, you have now stepped up into the community. I imagine that you're probably going around door to door, talking to constituents. You talked about how your district So far, it's been blue for a while, but now with redistricting and the lines are kind of changing around and everything else, and to see this result in the primary, do you feel like maybe the district is moving a little bit more towards the purplish red side, or what? Give me a feel for what your constituents are telling you.
Yes, we've picked up a little bit more of a conservative precinct, and then we've also picked up a little bit more of a liberal precinct. But in the balance, we have moved a little towards conservative, and so I think that is helping me. The other thing that's helping me is that my opponent, his previous district only had 2 of the precincts that we now have, so he hasn't been well known in this district. He hasn't been involved in this district, whereas I've been knocking on doors and talking to people in this district. Well, I've lived here for a long time, for one thing, and then the other thing is that I've been campaigning here for 2 years. So people are used to seeing my signs. They're used to having me knock on the door. They know I'm coming, and they stop me in the grocery store and we talk issues, and so those things are helpful.
Right, exactly. Kathy, as you go out and you talk to your constituents in your neighborhoods and around the various places, what are the big issues? I mean, I know what my issue is. I know what the people who listen to this show, I know what they call in about and everything else. But I'm curious, when you go out there, the first thing when they open the door and they start talking to you and realize who they are, do they talk about the PFD? Do they talk about ranked choice voting? Do they talk about the budget? Do they talk about inflation, the economy? What are the crime? I mean, what are the things that matter to your constituents? What's the number one issue that's coming forward to you as a candidate?
Michael, the list that you just said is really what we talk about all the time, what I hear all the time. I will say the number one topic of conversation when I'm out there knocking on doors is the PFD. I'm in a working class district. That PFD for every family member makes a big difference for these families. I am pro PFD. I think anybody that's lived in Alaska their whole lives and know what the PFD really is, really understands that is the Alaskan people's money. Right. And so when they arbitrarily decided that they were going to take part of our money and we should be grateful for the amount that they leave us, people are not happy about that. Understandably, people want that to be solidified so that we know exactly that the PFD is not going to be a political football that the legislature uses every year to get whatever special interests they're interested in working with. And so that is number one this year. It's very interesting because we have the largest PFD ever in the state history, and we know that it should have been quite a bit bigger, and the state has taken thousands of dollars. We've never had a tax in the history of the United States that taxed children. Taking a permanent fund dividend away from my grandchild is taxing my grandchild, and I don't agree with that, and I'll fight against it.
Let me get a clarification from you here, because I know where you're going with this and I know what your position is, but just for people who are listening, because we've had a lot of candidates that say, well, I'm pro PFD. I'm for the PFD. I want a sustainable PFD. I want a PFD that, is reasonable and rational. But let me just be clear. You are talking about following the statutory formula and giving people their full PFD and keeping government's hands off of it. They can live on their 50% or whatever that they get, plus the 75, all the other monies that they got. But we should be getting our full statutory PFD. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And, even my opponent says that he's for the PFD, and he spent the last 7 years whittling away and chipping away at our money. And it's not just that they want to take our money. They want to take our money and give it to the government to grow government programs in an already bloated government. And so I don't, that is not my position. I will never do that. I do believe 100% that is Alaskans' money. That's my money and your money, not the state's money. And so I will continue to fight for that. It's interesting how people have twisted that, exactly what you're saying, Michael, to be able to say I'm pro-sustainable PFD.
Right.
Well, if you grow the government to these unsustainable levels, PFD will never be sustainable. They will have to take the PFD from us to sustain their bloated government. I don't support that.
It's a reasonable, right? It's a reasonable PFD.
Yeah,
We want
reasonable.
a reasonable PFD. We want a sustainable PFD.
Yeah.
I mean, they put all these modifiers on the phrase PFD, and they say that's what, of course, we want. I support a PFD.
Right.
A PFD that's supportable, sustainable, manageable, gullible. Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. So anyway, Kathy Henslee is our guest, candidate for District 13. We're up against the break. We're going to take a quick one. And when we come back, we're going to dive down into some more issues, some more details of her campaign. And then we'll find out where we can find out more about her and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, we're going to be talking with her in the chat room during the commercial break. And then we'll be back. It is the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and around the world on the interwebs. It's a series of tubes. That's right, at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream, and, of course, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and more. Back with more, and Kathy Henslee right after this. Don't go anywhere.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and michaeldukeshow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Kathy Henslee, Michael on YouTube just said, Kathy needs a Duke's coffee mug, the beard curler coffee, Michael Duke Show, 6 o'clock club mug. That's what she needs. Says, hi there, sunshine. Well, that's probably more positive than my mug. So I can't talk about that. All right. Let's see. You can, I'm sorry, somebody just said you can 2 monster drinks and 1 pot of coffee. I only had 1 monster drink and a half a cup of coffee, but I'm fine this morning. I'm fine. I'm just fine. It's all good. Let me go through the chat room real quick to see what, if anybody has had any questions or discussions. Sandy, this is off of your early comments here. Sandy says people don't realize how bad sex trafficking is in Alaska. I know that you've addressed that. And yeah, we do have some issues with that here for sure. Michael says Kathy would be a steady conservative voice right in the middle of Anchorage, which also would good. David says she has a good chance of winning, right? Based on the primary, her district seems like it's a swing. But again, those were the preliminary primary numbers where she was up by 3% or so. Remember, when it came down to it, all the votes were counted, everything else. One, I got to find the camera. One single vote. One vote. Your vote does count. But it's also a good sign, Kathy, I think, because, again, it does show how with the redistricting and everything else, those things can change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing that's it's really good news is we had 3 people in the race. Tim Hewitt was the Alaska Independence Party candidate. And he and I have talked throughout the campaign, and he withdrew from the race and is supporting me. And so I think he got about 244 votes. So if we can get those voters out, and if they can choose to support me, that would be another plus for our campaign.
Right, exactly. I mean, and that's the good news is we have had several races where they had a handful of people drop out of various races. And that gives a chance for kind of a better better competition between just a couple candidates instead of 4 or 5 or however many candidates are in that race. So I think that's definitely a good thing. Let me scroll through here just in case real quick to see if there's anything else that people have asked. Nope. I think that's pretty much all the comments so far. But Kathy, I want to come back to what we were just talking about, which is the PFD. Because again, this is a question that I ask all the time of candidates when I say, what's the number one thing they're talking about? And I would say 85% of the candidates, what are your constituents talking about rather? 85% of the candidates come back and say the number one thing, they're all talking about all the things that I said, but the number one thing, like you said, is the PFD. Because I think it's really on Alaskans' mind. Alaska is a very unique state. We have a unique, with our resource base, with the fact that we don't own any of the subsurface mineral rights, that's owned collectively, the fact that the permanent fund dividend was set up to break off a portion of those that wealth and distribute it to the people. Jay Hammond called it the kind of the most capitalistic aspect of it, is that you were getting basically paid for your loss of your mineral resources, and that then you would have kind of skin in the game, so to speak. And so I think more and more people are concerned about the PFD. And you're right, we have to ask those clarifying questions, because as you said, how many candidates have said, I'm for a PFD, a sustainable PFD, or a reasonable PFD, or whatever modifier they're going to use. But the people, when they think PFD, they understand, a lot of them understand, not all of them, that's your money. That's not just free money that the government gives out. That is your share of the resource wealth in the state of Alaska, right?
That's exactly right. And I know a lot of people do not understand that, especially people that are newer to Alaska. They don't understand that we did, when the permanent fund was established, we did give up our mineral rights. If you lived in Texas and drilled in your backyard and hit oil, you could put an oil rig out there and you could make money off of that. That is not true in Alaska. That's not the way we have it. And a lot of it is because a lot of our resources are in the Arctic, and for people that are working a regular job in Anchorage or in the valley or what, they're not going to be able to access those resources.
Right.
So it's a way for us all to participate in the absolute amazing wealth of this state. And it is our money. It's just like if we invested in anything, if we invested in any business, and the business owner one year came by and said, we've decided not to pay your share of the dividend this year because we wanted to buy a new truck for myself, and
Right.
we would take them to court and say, no, that's not the way this works. This is a business arrangement, and we're going to stick to the contract that we all agreed on many years ago.
We're all shareholders. I mean, we're shareholders in a company. It's like going, like you said, a money market, company sends you dividends every year. And then one year they say, we didn't really have enough money to kind of operate, and we kind of got a little excessive. So we're going to take some of your money and we're going to keep it and then spend it how we think we should. Sorry. And that's just not how it's supposed to run. I mean, that was not the intent of it. And so we'll see. I'm hoping that this stops being the political football that it's been over the last few years. All right, we just heard the ding. It's time to jump back into it. Kathy Henslee is our guest, candidate for District 13. Here we go, the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like and share, let's go. All right, we're going to continue here now. Kathy Henslee is our guest, candidate for House District 13. Don't forget, coming up after the top of the hour, we're going to be talking with Louie Flora, who is running down in Homer for House District 6. I got to remember, every time they do the redistricting, they flip all the House districts, and it takes me 10 years to memorize them all, and then they got to get it all screwed up. All right, Kathy, so let's talk a little bit here about, we just talked about the PFD, and I think we're pretty clear on where you stand on the PFD. But let's talk a little bit more about some of the other issues, budgets, departments, things like that as you look at things. So I guess the first question is, the size and scope of government. Are we too big? Are we too small? Are we just right? I mean, where do you think we sit right now on state spending? And if it's too big or too small, how should we increase or decrease it? What's your take here?
Yeah. So the short answer is we're too big. We have a bloated government. People have a hard time seeing where we can cut, but I come at this as a business person. And when you're running a business, you have a bottom line that you have to meet. We have to pay certain things, and we have to meet payroll and all those kinds of things, but we also have to be bringing in revenue. So as long as I've lived in Alaska, our government has grown and grown and grown. And we need to make some cuts, and there are policies that are out there that we can look at that can make reasonable cuts. There's a lot of people that bemoan cutting government, but when almost a third of our jobs in the state are somehow connected to the government, that's too much.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a good summation of kind of where I'm at as well. When we first got that first big revenue payment for the first oil check that we got from the oil companies, it was $900 million. This is back in 1969, 1970, and it was $900 million. At that point, the state budget, the entirety of the state budget, was like $152 million. That was it. And if we extrapolated that out for both population growth and for inflation, we should be somewhere in the $2.3 billion range for a state budget. Instead, we're spending like $6 billion.
Mhm.
And at some point, you got to go, I mean, how can we be all things to all people? What does the Constitution demand that we provide? And what's the nice to haves versus the must haves, right? I mean, is that kind of the conversation that you have?
Yes. And, what we really should be concentrating on is how do we grow the private sector? How do we make the private sector increase? And we know that when the private sector increases, quality of life goes up, our tax base actually goes up. And then we're not so dependent on government jobs, because that is one thing that people say, if we cut, we're going to be cutting people's jobs. Well, if we're growing the private sector like we can, if we're encouraging innovation in Alaska, resource development, all the things that we know that we can do in Alaska, we can turn this around. It doesn't have to be this way for us to have the standard of living that we have.
Yeah, and as we look at this, and of course we look at some of the biggest lines in the budget. Of course, health and social services are number one, education is number two. We're spending huge amounts of money on this. We have of course the Medicaid expansion. Enormously increased the health and social services spend, and we continue to spend more on education than almost any other state in the country. We're like I think third in the nation as far as some districts. We're spending $17,000-$18,000 per student, and yet we continue to get the lowest scholastic scores, and we have 1 in 4 don't even graduate. I mean, is the answer to that situation more money, or do we have to fundamentally do we have to really look at what we're doing and see if there's a fundamental flaw in the system overall? What's your take on the education system?
I think that's the right question, Michael. What I get asked all the time is, we have a $64 million shortfall in the education budget. How are we going to close that gap? That's not the right question. What I want to look at constantly is results. And I just looked at these statistics yesterday, and the statistics that I read said that we're spending more than 49 other states, and our results were 49 other states are doing better than we're doing. So this is, if the results that we want are that our children get a good education, a solid academic education, we're not getting those results. No matter how much money we're spending, we are not getting those results. So we need to take a look at what the policies are that are going to get us to turn that around. I graduated in 1984 from Service High School, go Cougars, and we were second in the nation. We were right in the middle for how much we were spending, but we were getting really good academic results. So it's a matter of policy, and it's a different mindset. If money were the answer, all of our children should be going to Harvard. If that's the way that worked. So when we're spending just out of control in our district, and then their answer is always, how do we get more money? And I'll tell you something that's really interesting, that I find interesting, Michael, is when I bring up results, I am now characterized as anti-education because I want results for our children.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Isn't that why we have an educational system, for results for our children?
Isn't that the third rail of politics? Anytime you start talking about education, and if you even suggest that there could be efficiencies found, that maybe it's not the money, maybe it's the way that we're teaching or the system that's fundamentally flawed and we should readdress it, you immediately get labeled anti-child, anti-progress, anti-education, whatever it is, when all I'm saying is I'm trying to have an honest conversation about it.
Right.
And the immediate thing is you must hate children. And I don't. I love children. I love my children. I love everybody else's children. They're the future. But we are failing. If we are at 48th, 49th, 50th percentile, or 50th out of 50 state achievements, and we have 1 in 4 not graduating, we are failing our children.
Right.
And it's obviously not an issue of money, because we've seen our, the curve for our spending is like a hockey stick over the last 30 years. then there's something else wrong. There's obviously something else wrong.
It is a very strange way to think about it, because in my mind, if we are not educating our children, we're anti-education, right? If we're not educating our children, why are we in this? And there's proven ways to change policy in our educational system that can make the education experience much better and beneficial for our children, for our teachers, for our communities. And that's what we need to move to. Right now, the satisfaction with teachers is not very high. And, a lot of people say, well, that's because we don't pay them enough. Well, actually, I actually agree that more of our budget needs to go directly into the classroom, and that means should affect teachers. If we're spending all this money on education, our teachers should be getting the most of that. They're not. And so they're not having job satisfaction. Nobody goes into the profession of teaching to have a failing class. That's not what they want to do. So
when you've only got 40% or 43% of every dollar going into the classroom, you have to start asking questions about administration and overhead and duplication of effort. 54 different school districts, some of them with only a handful of kids. And I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here, but we're out of time for this. So I want to give you the last 90 seconds here or so for your elevator pitch on why people should vote Kathy Henslee, where they find you. Are you doing meet and greets? Go. It's all you. Go.
Great. Well, first of all, I really appreciate you having me on, Michael. This is an important discussion. And I want to ask people, where do we want to go? What are the results that you are looking for in Alaska? If you're happy with the way things are going, then I'm probably not your candidate. If you want changes and you want to have results in all of the different topics that we've discussed this morning, then you should be looking at voting for me, and I would appreciate your consideration. I am at kathyhensley.com, and Hensley for Alaska is my Facebook page. So we would love for you to jump on board. We are needing lots of volunteers, and there's lots of candidates running, so the volunteers are a little bit thinner. But one of the things that we're going to be working on is getting out the absentee ballots, which when someone gets the election results in and then it starts dwindling down to the Liberals getting it, that's almost always the absentee ballot. So we need to start working on getting those. So anyway, yes, please email me. HensleyForAlaska.com Kathy at HensleyForAlaska.com.
Kathy Henslee, candidate for District 13. Thank you so much, folks. We're out of time. Back with more. The Michael Duke Show continues right after this. And Kathy, we're in the break now. I'm a slave to the clock. That's a hard break. I have no control over that one.
I got flustered for a second.
I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. You did great. So I try and give every candidate, a little bit like a second bite at the apple right before we go, because we're not on the timer now. We got about 5 minutes. I see that Louie Flora is waiting in the green room right now. He's ready. And so we're going to come to him in a minute, but I want to give you the last couple of minutes. If there's something that we didn't touch on, a topic that is important to you, or any final thoughts or a longer summation, whatever you want to do, I'm happy to.
What happened?
What happened to my hair? So whatever, if there's anything else you missed, this is your opportunity for that second bite at the apple, so to speak here.
Okay. Is it okay if I talk about an event that I have coming up?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do that.
She's looking it up, folks. That's what she's doing. For those of you listening on the audio stream, she's looking it up on her device. Go ahead.
Oh, are you ready for me now?
I'm ready for you now. Yeah. Hey, it's live. It's just me, you, and 60 of our closest friends on Facebook right now. So go ahead.
Here we go. So yes, we do have some events coming up, and I think it's always encouraging for people in our community to get together with like-minded people and really talk about a future that's possible for Alaska. So one thing that we have coming up is on September 27th, which is a Tuesday. We are going to be meeting at Las Margaritas on Diamond, which is in my district, and we're going to have some South Anchorage candidates there. Laddie Shaw, who's always a hoot to hang out with, Tom McKay, Craig Johnson, and Julie Cullum. We're all going to be there, and we would love to have you stop by and talk issues with us, and we'd love to meet you. So that's something I'd like to invite everybody to.
Okay, so next Tuesday, Las Margaritas at what time?
From 5:30 to 7.
5:30 to 7. All right. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Kathy, any final thoughts before I let you go then?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, there's several differences between my opponent and I. One of them that is really always so surprising to me is he's anti-hunting. He is, and that it's just this Alaskan way of life that I am totally for: independence, freedom, the ability to live the life that we want to live, the way we want to live it. And to me, those are reasonable expectations to live in the greatest state, in the greatest country in the world.
Good. And I think that's beautifully said. We'll leave it there. Again, hensleyforalaska.com is your website, and Kathy at hensleyforalaska.com. So good luck to you. I hope things are, again, a good race. This is going to be one of the stiffer races in the legislature, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the results are. I've liked all your answers for today, and if we have time, maybe we'll try and get you back on one more time before the end of before the actual election itself. Although we had an explosion of responses when I sent out 130 something emails. We got a bunch of people who responded, so I'm glad that we were able to get you on. Appreciate you coming on board this morning, Kathy Henslee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, folks, that puts Kathy Henslee back into the green room, and tell her thank you for that. Appreciate it. She can go on her merry way to continue her morning. Meanwhile, let's jump on over to Louie Flora, who is our guest for the next hour. He's candidate for House District 6, which is down, of course, in the Homer area, the seat currently occupied by Sarah Vance. And he joins us this morning to say hi and get a discussion on. Good morning, Louie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. It's bright and early and still dark down in Homer. Not quite raining this morning, but happy to be here.
You're lucky. Everybody else, it's rain. I keep making jokes about the big boat and two of every animal walking down the street. That's what it looks like around here. I swear, my dog looks at me and said, "Can you put my little floaty arms on me before I go out on the lawn to use the bathroom?" I mean, it's kind of that way around here. All right, Louie, you sound good. We got your good picture here, so we're just checking picture quality. We're about to jump into this. We are about 3 minutes away here from rejoining the radio, and then we will kick things off with you and just start right out of the gate. If you're ready, we're ready to go.
I think I'm ready. I've had 2 cups of coffee, so I'm doing good.
Okay, good. Please try not to vibrate off the screen too much. Maybe 2 is too much. I don't know. We'll find out. Louie, I'm going to put you back in the green room. Louie Flora, our guest. Again, a nonpartisan candidate for House District 6. Down in the Homer area, down there in the lower peninsula. So we're going to jump into that. Folks, do me a favor. Would you do me a favor? Would you like and follow this show? Like and follow the show page on Facebook. Would you subscribe on YouTube and ring the bell if you're watching on YouTube? If you're on Facebook, go over to YouTube and subscribe and ring the bell. At least, just for and then you can come right back. I know people are, I don't like YouTube because it doesn't give me the ever thing, and I'm used to Facebook, which is fine. I got no problem with that whatsoever. But if you do me the huge favor, because my whole goal here is to get more Alaskans involved in the conversation, right? I mean, that's what we really want. We want more Alaskans involved in the conversation all the time. So I just dropped the link in the chat room to the YouTube channel. And so go over there, subscribe, ring the bell, and then come right back to Facebook. Or you can go to Twitch and do that. I mean, whatever you want. I just want to get more folks involved. And of course, the more subscribers we have on each of the channels, the better chance for the secret algorithms to throw this up into people's faces as they're perusing whatever they're perusing. That's what it's all about. So anyway, if you do that, I would appreciate it. I would love that. It would help us out and make everything better. 358 subscribers on YouTube. I got 4,000 subscribers on Facebook. I'm just trying to get a few of you over to the other platform as well, because sometimes Facebook goes down, sometimes YouTube goes down, whatever. Anyway, like and share. No matter where you are, you can share the show. You can share it with your social media friends and family and everybody else. But get more people involved. That's the whole point here. All right, we're coming up to it. Let's do it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2 is right now. Let's do it. Here we go.
buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, across the world on this thing we call the internet. You can find it at michaeldukeshow.com. That's where you've got the audio-only live stream, as well as links to all my social media sites where we're simulcasting the show each and every morning. That would be Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And, of course, you can find the podcasts, which are available every day from any podcasting app, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, CastBox, Stitcher, and, of course, Spotify. And if you subscribe to the podcast, it automatically downloads every day. And you don't have to do anything about it. It's all good. So go check it out. We're also broadcasting, of course, live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator from all the way down in Adiak, Dutch Harbor, on Alaska, all the way up to the interior and Fairbanks, all the way up to Esther and Fox and out there across the state. And we're spending our time right now talking with candidates from around the state of Alaska because election days are just under 6 weeks away. 6 weeks from election day. And, of course, with ranked choice voting, we've got a plethora of candidates, and it should be interesting. And, I'm booking up interviews right now into October, so things are kind of hot and heavy. This morning, we just finished up with Kathy Henslee, and now we're moving down onto the peninsula from Anchorage to talk with candidates down there. Joining us this morning on the program is nonpartisan candidate for House District 6, which is Homer and the Lower Peninsula. That's the seat currently being held by Sarah Vance, if you're in that area. Louie Flora joins us this morning to discuss his candidacy, and we want to get a little bit of insight into who he is, and where he comes from. He joins us this morning to discuss it. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you. Hope the echo is not too bad. I'm in my campaign office here.
No, you're fine. It's all good. We're used to the vagaries of audio here on the program, and of course, I was just saying there's a couple silver linings, but one of the silver linings from the pandemic is now everybody's used to the kind of the Zoom lifestyle, so they've got the audio and video down pretty good. So, no, you sound good, and we're ready to go into it. So, Louie, folks may not know who you are. They may not know kind of your background and everything else. So, first things first. Let's jump into this and find out, who you are, where you come from, and let's start right there.
Well, great. Thanks a lot. Yeah, my name's Louie Flora. I grew up 16 and a half mile East End Road in Homer. My folks moved out there in the 70s. We moved down full time in 78. I was born in Fairbanks. Went to school here through high school, graduated high school here, and went outside for a bit of travel and some education. I didn't quite finish my formal education ever because I went up to UAF and got enrolled in the university's internship program for the legislature in the early 2000s and really got fascinated by the legislative process. That's an internship through UAF and UAS where you go down and are immersed. You work in an office and are essentially a staff person down there, seeing the whole process. And so I thought that was fit with my commercial fishing career as well. The legislative session wrapping up hopefully in May. And so you can get on, and I'm a lifelong Bristol Bay fisherman. But that started me off on staff, working as a staff down in Juneau for a decade. So I'm very familiar with the legislative process. I've seen the highs and lows of the different policy battles and for a 10-year sprint there, and raising my family here. I have 2 kids in high school. My wife's works here as subs in the schools and works as a commercial fisherman as well, and is helping with the campaign. And that's about it. I'm just grew up here and hoping to bring some of my experience from Juneau to bear as a representative.
One of the things I like to ask candidates is, what exactly, made you jump into the politics, or, I like to say, when exactly did you lose your mind? Was it a single thing? Was it was it cumulative, or, but it sounds like you had an interest in politics for a while or way back. What made you jump from the behind the scenes into the public arena as, running for office? What was the catalyst to move you from, from staffer or behind the scenes to the front of the dais, so to speak?
Well, one thing I didn't mention, I was elected to the local utility board of directors down here in Homer, the Homer Electric Association board. And I think that's also kind of driven in me a desire to change policies that might reduce energy costs for Alaskans. And we have a pretty high per kilowatt price on our electricity down here. And so we're working as a utility to look for different diversifying our energy portfolio so that we're able to put downward pressure on rates. And so I think that lawmakers can work together to come up with policies that help the average home and business owner with their utility and gas rates and decrease energy costs there. I think for me, it's just a desire to help businesses and average Alaskans have a lower cost of living is a real important goal of mine.
You're running in a race as a nonpartisan, and I've seen kind of an interesting trend across the state here over the last 10 years or so, where we've seen candidates from one, thing or another. Probably one of the most high profile was Bill Walker, who was a Republican, and then he became a nonpartisan. We've also seen, people like Bryce Edgman, who was a Democrat, now become an independent or a nonpartisan. What does nonpartisan mean to you? I mean, if we had to label, and I know some people want to step away from labels because I don't want to be labeled, but if you had to identify, I mean, people want to know, when you say nonpartisan, is it that you are, conservative on some issues, liberal on other issues? You just don't know, you're in the middle of the road. But I mean, how would you identify yourself, or what are the things that make you not want to join one side or the other, I guess is my question.
Well, I've always been a nonpartisan registered Alaskan. And as you know, the majority of Alaskans are either nonpartisan or undeclared. So I think it's just gives individual the freedom to choose by policy and by and by candidate who they support based on the soundness of their ideas. I worked in the legislature in the Republican caucus as a staff person for 10 years. And so I, pushed a number of policies forward in my capacity as staff person, which of course you're just behind the scenes helper with the and policy analysis and shuffling papers and getting people coffee and stuff. But, I've worked on conservative policies, and I've worked on, I guess, what you would call liberal policies, policies around salmon habitat protection and other things that are more associated with kind of environmental concerns. So a short answer, I'm not going to give you a good answer, but I like the freedom, that there's a certain amount of freedom we cherish as Alaskans. And I think that translates over into our politics as well, and so I value individual and nonpartisanship because of the freedom of it.
I mean, I'm a libertarian, so I can identify in part with what you're saying because, at some point everybody hates me because I don't like one policy or another, and I choose that as a lifestyle choice. That's for me. But I guess the bigger question comes back to one of the things we've seen being a bone of contention in the legislature is organization. And of course, we've had a majority of Republicans elected over the last handful of years, and yet every time it breaks down, there's always some kind of fight, whether it was on the House side. This last time, even on the Senate side, there was a delay in getting organized because of infighting between different parties. So if you were elected to the House, are you constrained to, are you going to stick with a majority? Are you going to avoid a Democratic or a Republican majority? Where would you sit, or would you join with either one of those if you were elected?
Yeah, and what I've been asked this question a number of times, and what I say is I will look at the characters that are making up the majority and who's gunning for what position. And I will make my decision based on that. And it really comes down to the chairs of finance is a really important decision for a coastal lawmaker, one that's not, because coastal and rural lawmakers really need to have that calculus when they go into the legislature, what's going to protect the interest of their district financially. And so I will look at who's proposing to be in leadership and make a decision based on that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be what's the healthiest for my district. We have a lot of specific needs in my district for infrastructure that I don't want to see railroaded by say if there's a majority that's from urban Anchorage. I mean, obviously they're going to a whole lot of it's going to revolve around Anchorage and the Matt Valley, but I do want to see leadership positions that look out for the interests of rural and coastal Alaska.
You were saying that you worked in the staff and you worked on conservative issues. Whose office did you work in when you were in the legislature?
Well, this is the third rail for my. No, I did. I worked for my friend Paul Seaton.
Oh, okay.
For 10 years, and so.
I was like, what was the third rail? What was that all about? Okay, I understand what you're saying now. Okay. It gives us, just so people have kind of a background. Now, as you've gone about and talked with people in your district, I've run for office, and I always found that to be the most exhausting, but also the most fulfilling part of a campaign was going door to door and talking with people and being one-on-one and finding out their issues. And I've had candidates give me a variety of issues that their folks are concerned about: the PFD, the economy, inflation, crime, the budget. I mean, those kind of things. But as you go door to door and talk to people, what is the number one issue that your constituents are talking to you about as you go door to door out there?
Well, the ranked choice voting has been the confusion with ranked choice voting is something I've heard a lot of. Also, the permanent fund dividend obviously is a big one. Road maintenance is huge down here. We're getting our East Hill and West Hill are getting resurfaced now, and people are really happy about that. Homelessness, one huge issue, and Sarah Vance and I were both at Chamber of Commerce meeting yesterday on this, but affordable housing and the problem of not having enough housing for service industry and seasonal workers in Homer to live here. And some of them are having to move out of town and drive substantial distances to come to work, which cuts into their ability to keep and maintain a living wage. But then we have obviously Homer is a beautiful place, and the housing market's going well here, and a lot of people are setting up the short-term rental and the VRBO industry. So there's kind of a tension there between affordable housing and the VRBO issue.
Which and is also, that's like the Airbnb. For those who don't know what that's Airbnb, VRBO is vacation rentals. They're short-term vacation rentals when people rent out their homes or their apartments for short-term for the summer season, for the tourist season, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have clarified that.
No, that's fine. And so when you talk to these folks and they talk about these different things, I mean, the permanent fund, I know for many, I was just saying earlier to Kathy Henslee that, I asked this question of all the candidates, and probably 85% of the candidates come back and say, of all the issues, probably the one that keeps recycling back and is the most urgent to many people is the permanent fund dividend, because it has the largest impact on their own personal economies. And it's all about the economy, stupid, right? That's what it's all about. And so, what are they saying about the PFD? I mean, are they concerned? Are they, wanting to get back to it? What are your constituents saying about the permanent fund?
Well, my constituent said very loudly in 1999, and I have a friend of mine brought me the election results again. But when they asked whether on the advisory question in '99 on whether state government use a portion of the permanent fund to balance the budget, 52% turnout, and 90% of voters back in '99 said no. So my district very clearly articulated their feelings on the permanent fund.
Right. Exactly.
And I respect that. And I too believe that probably a majority of candidates, that the economic multiplier in this borough alone of the permanent fund, the activity it generates locally is critical. And so when we cut the permanent fund to balance the budget, what we're also doing is cutting our local economic activity. We're having, like Keith Lee says on your show a lot, it's an inverse head tax. It's a regressive tax on Alaskans when you cut the permanent fund. And so I'm absolutely opposed to changes with the, cutting the permanent fund or reducing it. And I additionally would like to see it become less of a football, like the previous candidate was saying, and put in the Constitution. So we're able to get beyond that discussion and just establish that this is the deal,
Right. Louie Flora is our guest candidate for House District 6. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will dive into some deeper discussions on some of the other issues. We'll continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now, commercial break with Louie Flora, who is, again, candidate for House District 6 down in the peninsula. We got about 4 or 5 minutes, and Louie, I like to kind of change gears during the commercial break so we don't repeat ourselves for the podcast later on. Let me go back to, I saw a couple questions here out of the chat room that I thought were interesting because they were more localized questions. I see Bill in the chat room is asking, I would like to know Louie's stance on personal watercraft in the Ketchimack Bay. I know that's been a contentious issue down in the Lower Peninsula, where that's been banned for quite some time, and now recently it's been reversed, and people have had a chance to get on pro or con side of that. Where do you stand on personal watercraft in the Ketchimack Bay?
Well, I think that the process that they took to rescind the prohibition, cut the public out to the degree that it was established through a rulemaking process that had a lot of public input. I personally don't think that I think it's a little overblown, the concern about personal watercraft. I spend time out in the Ketchimack Bay. I like to surf, and I know how bad the weather can be on the bay, and how unfun it can be for for jet skiing compared to other lakes and stuff up in different parts of Alaska. So I think that the environmental concern is a little overblown, considering the amount of water taxi traffic and other vehicle traffic we have in the bay. So,
right.
But process-wise, I think it should. I believe it should have been more of a citizen-based process with more input and not just top-down.
So you're not against it per se. What you object to was the process that reinstated the personal watercraft. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I had to, I as I was following this debate, and I call Homer my adopted hometown. I'm very concerned about, I love it down there. And, ideally, all things being equal, I'd love to live down there one day. But I had to laugh at as I watched some of these things, where they're talking about the jet skis being polluting. And now maybe if we were talking 35 years ago when they were all two-stroke oil leakers doing all that kind of stuff, but most of these jet skis these days are cleaner than my car. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I agree with you that definitely overblown in that regard. And I think people should have the ability, up until the point that they do something wrong, they should, it's kind of innocent until proven guilty kind of thing. I'm going over here. What will it be about the chairs of finance that will sway him? You mentioned earlier that in your decision to join a caucus or to bind with somebody that, it would have to depend on who the chairs of finance. I mean, if you were picking druthers, who would you want in finance if that's the case? I mean, of the players that are out there now, who would make it more appealing for you to join a caucus at that point to be the co-chairs?
Well, I would want to see someone from coastal Alaska be a co-chair of finance and make sure that we have rural representation, and someone from this district or Kodiak or Southeast that understands deeply understands the needs of infrastructure needs of coastal Alaska and can really stand up and fight for those would really be who I'd want to see in place as at least one of the co-chairs.
We're talking with Louie Flora, candidate for House District 6. We're just over a minute away. You mentioned putting the PFD and enshrining it in the Constitution. And so we'll start with that here when we return to the radio. Because I think that's a big issue for many people. There's been a big move against, constitutional convention and things like that. It could be done by the legislature, but we know there's really no political will to fix that. So we'll dive into those questions here in just a second. Hold the line, Louie. We're going to be right back to you. I'm going to kill your mic for a second, and we're going to come back. Folks, if you haven't yet, please like and share the show. It doesn't matter what platform you're watching it on, you can share it. There's always a share button around there somewhere. You can share it with your local friends and other social media contacts and everything else. We'd love to get more people involved in the conversation. We got about 60 people between the platforms this morning watching and seeing what's going on. We're going to continue here in just a minute. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. You heard the ding. Time to go. Let's jump back into it. Here we go. All right, we're continuing now. Louie Flora is our guest, nonpartisan candidate for House District 6. Right before the break, we were talking about the permanent fund dividend and the fact that, as we've said many times on this program, that it is essentially sucking up all the oxygen in the room anytime that it's discussed in the legislature, and it has led and contributed to many a special session. We've had more special sessions in the last 5 years than I think in all the previous years combined. And Louie talked about a couple things. And one of the things you mentioned, Louie, was enshrining the formula and getting it, essentially taking the football off the table, taking that off the table and moving forward. And so when you say enshrining, what's your pathway for that? Is it trying to get the legislature to do it, which I'm skeptical of, or is it a constitutional convention? And what exactly would be enshrined? Would it be the statutory formula? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we would need to have an advisory vote, and then we would have to have the legislature in the absence of a constitutional convention. If the people of Alaska decide the convention is the way they want to go, then definitely that would be top on the agenda for the delegates to the convention to discuss. And I think looking at the delegates would then be tasked with looking at the formula that we have in statute currently that the legislature has not been able to apparently follow, and determine whether that's the what they want to enshrine, or if they want to modify the formula and enshrine a different formula that's provides more leeway for the legislature. Or sorry, my pictures are falling down. But I think they'd start with the statutory formula, and the delegates would have the very difficult task of deciding whether that was what they want to enshrine in the Constitution.
Right. So do you support, I mean, will you be supporting a con at the vote? I mean, is that something because again, we've seen a lot of discussion. Governor Dunleavy last year proposed putting it putting into the Constitution. There was a flurry of support from everyone from Louise Stutes down on the Republican side to try and do it. And of course, it immediately went nowhere. So obviously not really any political will to get it done through the legislature. So would you support a con? Do you support that idea of that's the only way to get it into the Constitution?
Well, I think the political will, I mean, if they work on it enough in the legislature, and they're getting closer to that turning point, I believe, with the numerous special sessions and really realizing that this is something that's untenable to have this debate year after year after year. And obviously the majority of Alaskans strongly support the dividend. So I think the legislature can do it. I personally am a no vote on the Constitutional Convention because I think it opens up too much of a Pandora's box for debate on different subjects that we don't even have on our radar right now, as far as all the different provisions that deal with natural resource utilization and fisheries. So I'm very concerned and wary of opening up the Constitution right now. But on the other hand, I did have a good conversation with a gentleman yesterday who said he thought having the convention could be kind of a pressure relief valve for Alaska, to get some of these political tensions defused, to have a bunch of delegates come together in a convention setting and have the conversations one-on-one in a formal setting. It could lead to more, agreement in society than discord.
Right.
Like I said, as you can tell, I'm a little torn because on the other hand, I think it could lead to a great deal of division on the specific questions. So.
Well, and I don't think you're alone on that. I mean, early on, I was very torn and was not in favor of the con specifically for a lot of the reasons you talk about, because once you open it up, there's potentials for many changes, not just the changes you want. But I was finally swayed with the idea of the people have to ratify and they have to make the final decision. And as you pointed out in that vote of 99, the people, if it's a PFD and things like that, those things could be locked in. If there's something else that gets changed and the people support it, we have to kind of live with that. That's how it works. I was encouraged by your earlier comment that there needs to be an advisory vote of the people on any PFD change. I'm assuming that that's something that you would stand for in the legislature if you were a legislator, that they must have a say, that the legislature just can't arbitrarily change something, that they should have at least an advisory vote on it, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. And I noticed, again, going back to what you were talking about, the 99 vote, which essentially was the 99 vote was a precursor to SB 26, which is the POMV law. And the POMV law, unfortunately, is in direct contravention with the statutory formula. I mean, they could work together, but really you'd have to really kind of warp it and jump through some hoops. But primarily it's in contravention with what the statutory PFD formula says. So the question is, and I know there's already legislators who are talking about putting together legislation to repeal SB 26 because it doesn't have a lot of the inflation proofing and a lot of the market, driven balances to keep the permanent fund in check. And there's a lot of people talking about repealing or attempting to repeal SB 26. What are your thoughts on the POMV law? And would you support, a repeal to at least say we can then follow the law with the statute because now there's no conflict?
I would definitely support reanalysis of that concept. I think where we go then as a state is a serious discussion about broad-based taxes of some kind, a broad-based sales tax or a flat income tax. But I think, when you remove that POMV and the use of the earnings, I think it leads directly to that discussion, which, I mean, we probably are going to have it pretty soon anyways. But I would definitely support rescinding a reanalysis and likely rescinding that statute.
Yeah. So When you say, again, supporting the PFD, do you believe, I mean, if you had been in the legislature this last go around where they were voting on a full statutory PFD, would you have been a yes vote on a full statutory PFD? Do you believe that that's the people's money and they should have it?
Yeah, I definitely would have, and when the numbers aren't there, though, I mean, the vast majority of the House concurred on the lesser amount, which is still the biggest dividend in state history. And so it's really a protest vote to take, to oppose the biggest dividend in state history. So at the end of the day, if the numbers aren't there working practical politics, then I would vote for the, what came out of there with the largest PFD in state history, but wanting more.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, we keep getting to this point where people say, I support a PFD, a sustainable PFD, a reasonable PFD. We see all these, modifiers to the PFD term, but really, I want to ask people straight out, statutory PFD, is that what the people the statutory formula that's worked for 40 years, should that be what the people are getting, or should government be, as you talked about earlier, having this inverted head tax on every child, man, woman in the state? Should they be taking that money for government, or should they be just transferring it like they've done for years, giving people the money, allowing it to affect the economy, grow the private economy? Or should they be saying, no, we're going to pick and choose where that money's going to go? We know better than you how to spend that money.
No, for sure. I mean, that's part of the discussion, and on why there's a push for a constitutional convention, I think, as well. And I've heard it said on your show that people are disappointed in legislators for going outside the law on the statutory formula, on 90-day session. There's frustration there, and I understand that. And so I think that getting, you have a statute, if they need to look at the statute, if it's not working for the present situation, then that's the rights of a legislator, sure, to modify the statute. But yeah, I mean, the formula's worked. I think we go by the formula and we provide the economic value of the PFD, and then we look at size of government and ways to fund it. And there's a lot of options on the table, I think, for funding government.
All right, we'll dismount from this horse. I think we beat this one to death. Let's talk a little bit about the budget overall. The size and scope of government, the budget in the state of Alaska, $6 billion. Is the size of government too big, too small, just right? What is Louie Flora's take on the size and scope of government in Alaska right now?
I think we have to look at all the programs, including the subsidies that we provide as a government program. We need to definitely take another look at the deductible tax credits that we're offering for legacy fields up on the North Slope for that, as part of a tax structure that was designed to increase investment, employment, and production. And we need to make sure that the system we have in place with the amount of money that the state is foregoing in deductible tax credits, that program is actually doing what it's intended to do.
Right.
And so I think the size of government right now is we're living within our means as much as we can. We still have a structural deficit moving forward, but the infrastructure money from the federal government and the recent oil price increase and when the market was on the rise, that was helpful for the whole state and kind of delayed the discussion on how to fund government. I think that the education system, we need to definitely take a look at how we can best serve the children, and through teacher retention, teacher pay, and also energy costs for school buildings. We have an extremely diverse school system, and so looking from Western Alaska all the way down to in my district with the different Russian Old Believer villages, and we have Anchorage with some of the most language diverse neighborhoods in the United States. So it's not just as simple as we have a huge education budget and we're underperforming. It's a matter of looking at this giant state with all sorts of needs and coming up with solutions. And it would take the legislature a whole session or whole legislature, I think, to really come to terms with how we decrease costs and increase performance in our education system. I think the Alaska Reads Act is a good start to increase for outcomes. The governor and a number of lawmakers that passed that, and so I think focusing on early outcomes is one way to increase performance overall, and also ultimately increase public safety and the betterment of society if we're really focusing on early learning outcomes.
I mean, you said, government is currently living within its means. So what I said, too big, too small, just right. Are you falling into the just right category? I mean, is that what you're saying? Is that you think that's what we're getting right now, or what we're the spend that we're having right now is appropriate? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, you look at programs like the oil spill prevention and response budget that protects coastal Alaska from oil spills and allows our fishing fleets to be prepared to respond. And that program's going into a deficit very soon. There's a lot of programs that on a case-by-case basis, they're, when they come to the legislature for their, in the budget finance subcommittee process, they're showing that they're cut to the bone essentially. And so I think it's easy to talk about generalities about government, but when you get down to the legislature and each department is coming to the legislature with their needs, and the legislature has provided as much funding as they deem adequate, but then there's still unallocated reductions that potentially the governor wants to see them make without specifying what department. I think that's a real problem. And so it's really, the governor needs to come up with a budget that's specifies exactly what those reductions are, right, and not pass it on to the legislature.
So, Timothy, I was going to let you go, but actually we don't have enough time here. So I'm going to hold you over for just a little bit. We're going to continue a couple minutes into the next segment. Louie Flora is our guest. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Folks, don't go anywhere. We will be back with more here in just a moment. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. It's what we do every day. The Michael Duke Show. Back with more and Louie Flora right after this.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now with Louie Flora. So hopefully, Louie, that's okay that I keep you over here for just a minute or so here as we keep things going on. I don't want to beat a dead horse with this one, but I'm coming back to this idea. You did say, earlier, because of the infrastructure money, because of CARES Act money, because of oil prices spiraling, we're taking care of those issues now. But all of those things are either one-time or short-term fixes. I mean, the market vagaries of oil, because of the war in Ukraine, that's why we've seen the spike. That will probably continue to, it's slowly diminishing. The infrastructure and the CARES Act money, those were all, one-time fixes or short-term fixes. I mean, we've got as you said, we have a structural deficit in this state. And so the question is, do we go out and find and raise more money? Do we take more of the PFD? Do we create a taxation structure or whatever to try and fill the structural deficit? Or do we look at the programs that are being discussed and say, what are nice to haves and what are must haves? I mean, the Constitution mandates infrastructure, public safety, and education. Everything outside of that, in my mind, is a nice to have. It should either be taken up by local governments or private organizations or whatever. We're doing a lot of things that we may not necessarily be mandated to do. And with a structural deficit, don't we have a responsibility to look at those things and cut them back?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. And that's the budget process every year that the legislature undertakes. And that's a healthy process. We do have as an elected official, you have a responsibility to analyze what programs there are and whether they should be maintained or whether they should fall under the budget acts. And that's looked at every year. I think that, there are definite reductions. There's smart strategies for looking at teacher retention and hire, and looking at how we're maintaining our employees. I think we can. I think overall, though, what we're going to need is not just a reduction in government, but an increase in development of resources and private business that create and generate tax revenue for Alaska. And so I think the overall future strategy has to be looking at what are we doing to drive innovation in Alaska, to bring population into Alaska, to continue to grow our economy. As the last speaker said, it can't all be our economy. It's not healthy that we're entirely a third of our economy is government based.
Right.
So I think for the overall health, we need to be always looking at different businesses coming into the state, and how we incentivize that is important.
Well, it's one of the philosophies that I really loathe in government that seems to be coming out more and more recently in the last 5-6 years in the state, where we see a lot of discussion about government creating jobs, government creating and driving the economy. And that's part of the problem, is that government is a net consumer. It's not a creation mechanism. Private enterprise, the private economy, entrepreneurship, that's what creates wealth. They are the net. I mean, they're the net creators and contributors. Government is a net consumer. They consume. They don't do any. I mean, yes, they may build a capital budget and it may have a few jobs it's created, but it is the private economy that creates jobs for the long term and creates real wealth. And unfortunately, we seem to have a lot of people in government who seem to think that it's their job to create jobs in the economy, but none of those jobs are really long term, unless we want to create that that sucking loop, the self-licking ice cream cone of government wages being sucked out of the economy and given back to the government, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you look down in Homer, and we have such a booming boat building industry here. It's just amazing, the marine trades. And it's all local business owners, local designers, young people that grew up here, welders, fabricators, fiberglass people, and they do amazing work. And that's self-made. All that is essentially a function of local ingenuity and hard work. And I look at some of the members of the community here and what they've built with their ingenuity. It just blows my mind. Some of the young people that are involved in the fishing industry now, and there's government obviously has a role in maintaining our ports. The boatyard out on Kachemak Drive had a loan from the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, and so there's a function there for for those kind of quasi-government entities to assist with infrastructure.
Right.
Like my district, I think, is really a standard bearer for what private industry can do.
Yeah, well, and I think, again, that's what drives the economy. We're seeing what the effect of this dividend is going to be in the state. I mean, it's a huge boon for the private economy, and we've seen that money be sucked out over the last 6 years by the government, and I think that's part of the problem. You hear the ding, though, that means we're jumping back into it. So we're going to try and summate here and wrap things up and give you the final bite at the apple. The Michael Duke Show continues. Louie Flora is our guest. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share. Let's go. All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now. Louie Flora is our guest. I held him over because we ran the clock out on the last segment, and I want to get just a couple more quick questions in before we let him go. Again, size and scope. If you've listened, you mentioned you've been listening to the program and hearing some of the things we've been talking about. One of the things we talked about, of course, is the growth of government. And as I said earlier on, that first revenue check that the state got was over $900, almost $1 billion. That was back in the 1969, 1970. At the time, the state budget was $154 million. That was the whole state budget. And so if we extrapolated that growth out for inflation and for population growth and everything else, we should be spending somewhere in the $2.5 billion range. And instead, we're spending $6 billion. $6 billion over the last 3 or 4 years. And it always seems to be ever increasing. And we always hear, well, we just couldn't possibly cut. You mentioned the governor making kind of amorphous cuts and saying, we need to cut this much out of this department. You guys decide. And you're saying the governor should be more focused, pinpointed, I guess. We saw that in 2018, and immediately he got, hammered by the legislature and everybody else about, trying to make these cuts, and it ended up being no cuts in the end. And so the question is, how do we pull it back to where it's a more reasonable spend? I mean, we're spending $15,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state on state government. $15,000. And as I've often advocated, if we got the resource, and we're not taxed because it's a stealth tax. We're not being taxed because we don't have like an overt tax, but because we're the resource owners, that money flows straight into the state coffers. We never see it. We don't understand the cost of government. If instead every one of us got a check for $15,000 or $18,000 every year, followed up by a tax bill of $15,000 a week later, there would be pitchforks and torches all the way lined up to walk across the water to Juneau, right? Because they'd be like, wait a second, what's going on? So how do we fix it? How do we get those kind of reductions to a more reasonable level where we're not in structural deficit? How do we get there?
I would like to see more focus on healthcare costs. I mean, as one main driver of government spending for across the board. I think that, having some of extremely high healthcare costs in Alaska is one draw on our government spending and on our economy in general. I think we get to a more, a sustainable government level by analyzing what citizens want out of their government and focusing on those. And like you said, we know education is a big one. We know public safety is a big one. Road infrastructure is a big one. And so we have a kind of a set of building blocks that we start with. And then we look at everything else and how it interties all the other departments. And I mean, I'm a commercial fisherman in Bristol Bay, and I really rely on fish and game management. So that's, something that I wouldn't want to see go away. Are there reductions there? I'm sure. I mean, is there technological advances that we can use to assist the management that might decrease some of the need for assistant biologists or other staff, perhaps, but each department has its constituency, I guess, and that's therein is the problem.
Right. Well, it's always never in my backyard. I'm all for cuts, but don't cut that program because that's in my backyard and that's in my wheelhouse and that affects me. So don't cut that one, but cut everything else. I think that's the problem we're running up against. Look, I want to wrap things up here, Louie Flora. Last couple minutes here, and give you the shot at your elevator pitch. Why should people vote for you versus your opponent? What makes you different? And then of course, how do people find you? Are you doing events or whatever? So I'll give you the floor here for your elevator pitch, final summation. Why should they vote for you, and where do they find out about you?
My website is www.floraforhouse.com. www.floraforhouse.com. Why they should vote for me is I'm a lifelong Alaskan, lifelong commercial fisherman. I grew up here. I know the district. I know the process. I have probably the most experience of anyone in this race in the legislature. And I come from an era when we saw things happen and we worked to get things done for the district. For instance, we brought a natural gas line to Homer, which wasn't currently served. We repealed there was a nuisance tax on our sand and gravel operators, and we repealed that. We provided the impetus for the Regulatory Commission to create the net energy metering program, which has been very popular across the state in allowing homeowners to reduce their energy costs by putting up solar panels. We created a Jay Hammond Day to celebrate his accomplishments. I'm running because I want to see this district thrive, and I want to get our bite at the apple, and I want to be at the table. And so that's really why why I'm running. And we are having a event this Friday at the Quiana Bar, which is milepost 122.5 Sterling Highway in Clam Gulch, 5 to 7 p.m. Indoor-outdoor event. Here's the flyer. Barbecue salmon, and it's a great old bar. It's a historic roadhouse from the 1950s, and we'll be there. And I'd be more than happy to meet and greet everyone and grill the candidate and stump the chump.
Is it stump the candidate and grill the chum, or is it, I can't remember what it is. All right. Louie Flora, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us today. We appreciate it. And we wish you luck, and we will maybe talk to you again here before we hit the election day. Thank you for coming on board and being part of it today.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it, folks. So we're coming down to the end here and getting ready to wrap things up for the show today. Coming up tomorrow, of course, it is Firearms Friday, our chance to talk about Second Amendment issues and more here in the state of Alaska. And we will continue those discussions, of course, tomorrow. I don't have any guests lined up, but we'll see. I mean, it could just be you and me. It could be gun Q&A all day, which is just fine with me. I enjoy answering questions and talking about stuff like that and more. And then, of course, next week on the program, again, a full slate of candidates coming up here in the near future. And next week, we're going to have Sharon Jackson. We may have Mike Insulaco on Monday, Cliff Grow, Jessica Wright, Rosalind Casey, Stephen Wright, the full slew next week as well. So make sure that you stay tuned. Make sure you stay tuned for that next week. Don't forget, you can always come out and join us on Facebook if you'd like to participate in the program in a different way. Go to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show, and you can watch the videos. You can participate in the chat room and everything else. And most importantly, well, I mean, from my point of view, I guess, is don't forget that you can become a member of the Common Sense Corps, which is our Cool Kids Club. It's the fan club that helps support the show for as little as the cost of a cup of coffee a month. You can financially support the show. And that's how we're able to do things like we bought this software that allows us to have video interviews with the candidates and new hardware, computers, streaming, trying to make the things better, trying to make the show better and bring it into the 21st century. That's what we're trying. I know that the theme song says that we're a low buck radio show. That's how it is. But you know, it's with your help that we're able to do all these great things on the program. So if you want to become a member of the Common Sense Corps, just go to michaeldukeshow.com and click on Join the Corps, or you can go straight to patreon.com/Michael Duke Show. All right. Well, that's it for today. Some interesting conversations. I want to talk a little bit more about it. And there's some other issues that I didn't get to. Unfortunately, sometimes even 45 minutes is not enough to get to all the conversations you want with each and every candidate. So maybe we'll have them back on and talk about it. All right, folks, we're out of time for today. Thank you for coming on board. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will see you tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. All right, folks. Thanks for participating. I wanted to get to some more issues with Louie, but it's just it's so hard sometimes when you're trying to get down into the nitty gritty of some of these things. He has a issue on his website talking about safe communities, and I really wanted to talk about this one, but I couldn't get to it. This is what he says: safe communities. There is no doubt that we have unacceptable rates of sexual assault, gun violence, alcohol, drug abuse, and property crimes in Alaska. We want to live in communities where we're not worried about our things getting stolen and physically assaulted. The use of the word gun violence in this is concerning. I guess not concerning, but it raises questions. I agree that we have unacceptable rates of sexual assaults and property crime in Alaska. I don't know so much about the gun violence part of it. I wish I could have dove down into that a little bit more, but maybe next time we have him on, maybe we'll start off with that one before we get into more of the details. His website's got a lot of different components on it, although every time I clicked on something, it completely killed my internet. So I don't know what's going on there. I decided not to click any further into that, but there's a lot of big issues on there. You can go check it out if you are curious about it. I'm posting the link up in the chat room right now, and we'll see what we can do next time we run back on this. Okay. Folks, we're out of time for today. I gotta go, man. I got other things to do. A whole day ahead of me. Somebody asked, did you get Ron Gillum for House to come on with Ruffridge? I have not yet. I'm working on a couple different debates that I'm talking to the candidates about. The Ruffridge and Gillum debate would be one. The Shower and Massey debate would be another. We're working on a few of these. We'll see what we can come up with. We'll see if we can get everybody to participate. But I'm sorry, I've got an appointment. I got to get out of here. So we will talk with you again tomorrow. Thanks for coming on the show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day, my friends.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.